Hello everyone, this is John from Vulgar Kitten Studios and welcome to episode 14 of our Introduction to Web Development and PHP MVC Programming. What we're going to do today is we're actually going to be working with mail. And before we get started, I actually want to correct a couple of things that I did in the accessors video. I just forgot to do a couple things, so I'm going to go ahead and open up our project here. And I'm going to open, first of all, in the templates and our code. I'll go into the accessors and I will make sure that we extend eloquent. We need to make sure that we extend eloquent. And so now that that's done, we also need to make sure that we do the same thing in our roles accessor. So we'll extend eloquent like that. And so that's it. So before we actually start creating our mail service, I actually want to go through Outlook and set up my email account because I actually did a previous take of this video and I found out that the email address that I made in one of our previous tutorials doesn't actually work with SMTP. I guess just because it's so new. Gmail doesn't really trust PHP to send mail through it or something like that. I mean, I'm not 100% sure, but SMTP is not working through that email address. So I have to use my own. And so just to make sure that things go a little bit smoother, I'm going to go through and set up Outlook with my own email address, so that way I don't have to actually open the environment.json file so you can see my password. I don't feel like blurring it out and stuff, so I'm going to go ahead and do it this way. And you also get to learn how to set up an email account if you don't, or an email client if you've never done one before. So this is basically just kind of a next thing, but Outlook is a little bit trickier. So we're going to go through and we're going to say that we want to set up an email account. So I don't want to auto detect. I'm going to use the manual setup. So I'm going to go through here and I'm going to use proper IMAP because we're not using Exchange, we're using Gmail. So first you put in your name. Name really doesn't matter, and then you put in your email address, which is going to be john.menning89@gmail.com. I always use IMAP because the difference between POP and IMAP is the IMAP actually syncs email between all of your devices, but if you POP your server, if you use POP protocol, post office protocol, then you can actually wind up seemingly having lost emails because sometimes Outlook will download the email from the server while simultaneously deleting it from the server, and all of your emails don't get synced together. Now you can choose to, you can opt to leave a copy of the email on the server using POP protocol, but sometimes that doesn't work. It still comes through kind of wonky, so I like to use IMAP anyway. IMAP is a little bit more stressful on the server, but since we're using Gmail, I mean, it really doesn't matter. So I'm going to use IMAP, and for our incoming server, it's going to be imap.gmail.com, and for our outgoing, it's going to be smtp.gmail.com, and of course, our username is our email and our password, and we do want to use SPA, which is like SPA records and domain keys. It prevents email spoofing, so that's what we want to do. We'll use SPA, and we'll also open up the more settings, and I'll go over to the outgoing server tab, set up my outgoing server, and use use the same settings as the incoming server. Yes, you can do this as well, but I mean, it's if you want to split your incoming and outgoing services and use two different servers, you can absolutely do that. So that's something that you can do. Like I could put in my Vulgar Kitten Studios and use a different SMTP server from my IMAP server, but I'm actually going to just use the same server. And like I said, we could just check that box up there, and it would work exactly the same thing, exactly the same way. But I'm just going to put it in for the hell of it, and we'll say OK. And well, actually, let's see. We actually want to go over to the Advanced tab, and I'm going to make sure that I'm using security on my email. So the default IMAP port is 143, but we want to use SSL, so I'm going to change that to 993, and we'll change the encryption method to SSL, and we'll do the same thing for the outgoing server. Change it to SSL, and we'll change the port to 465, and click OK, next, and it will do its test thing. And so it's need to log in, and it's going to send a test email address as well, or test email, and that should complete the email settings. So now we can close, and we're all set. You can add another account, which I'm actually going to add another account, but I'm going to pause the video. And so that is my email address set up, and actually I have two of these. I don't want both of these, so let me see. Lose that one. There we go. All right, so now we can actually move on with our mail class. So I'll go ahead and go into our models, services, mailer. We'll open this up, and we're going to want to use the PHP mailer, class, and that is actually namespaced under the global namespace. So we need to use and PHP mailer. And so we denote the global namespace with backslash, but we don't want to have to do that every time, so we'll just say use it as PHP mailer, like that. And we'll need a public static mailer object or variable, and we'll set self mailer to be equal to a new PHP mailer. And so now we can actually start pulling in our configuration options and everything. So we'll say if config gets mail SMTP, then we'll want to use the self mailer is SMTP function. And that'll just set it up like that. And so we'll do the same thing. Excuse me, sorry, I'm moving the laptop around here. We'll do the same thing for the rest of the options, but we want, let's see, we'll just say self mailer host, and that is going to be equal to config get and mail dot host, like that. And like I said, it's exactly the same for the rest of the options, so I won't make you sit here and watch me type it out. Okay, so I'll just quickly go through these. We have the host, which is obviously going to be smtp.gmail.com. We have that set up in our configuration file. Then we'll use smtp auth. We use the same value as the smtp variable that's called here, and that's just because, like, if we don't use smtp, then we don't want to use smtp auth, so we can use the same value. Username is just your email address. Password is just your password for that email address. SMTP secure, that's the security method that you want to use, whether it be SSL or TLS or whatever it is, or none. You can actually use that in here. Just set it up in your configuration file. Port, which is going to be 465 because we're using SSL, and whether or not we want to use HTML files to be sent to the email address, and that's going to be a method which is just going to accept the Boolean value, which is HTML, that we set up in our configuration file. So now that we have all our configurations, we can use a public static function send to wrap the send functionality, and all we're going to do is accept an array of data within the parameters here, and we'll just wrap all of the PHP mailer options within that data array. So first thing, we need to call our initialize function to get all of our server configuration details, and we'll set data is equal to, and then cast that as an object just to make things a little bit more readable and user-friendly for us here. And we'll say if is set data from, so the email address that we're sending from, and we'll say self mailer set from, and this is a method that accepts two parameters, so we'll say data from, and that's going to be an array. We'll send the email and the name, like that. And so now we are going to be, like I said, we're going to be working with multiple sets of arrays. So we'll say if is set data addresses, so the addresses that we want to send to. So if that's set up, then we'll want to use a for loop. And so we'll say for I is equal to 0. I is less than the count of data addresses, I plus plus. And for each of those addresses, we're just going to add them using the self mailer add address function. And that will be data addresses. We want the email, and we want the email, and we want the name. And so we'll be doing essentially the same thing throughout the rest of the settings. So we'll want to do this for the reply to. So we'll say if it's set the reply to, then we'll want to check for the count of reply to. And the reply to is going to be an array as well with the email and the name. And so we'll just copy this down again. And the next one we're going to use is CC, which doesn't have the same settings. Let's see, the add address, we want to add reply to. Make sure we get the right method as well. So we want to add a CC here, and for the CC, we'll just check for the count of CC, and just pass in the CC index. And then we'll do the same thing for the BCC. Just add a B in here, like that. And we'll want to do the same thing for attachments. So we'll check for attachments, and for each attachment, we'll add the attachment at the index. And then from there, all we have to do is just add the subject, the body, and the alt body, and then send a message. So we'll say if is set our data subject, then we'll say self mailer subject is equal to data subject, and we'll copy that down for the body, and check that for the mailer, and then we'll also want the alt body. So we'll say alt body, and just add in uppercase alt body, and then we'll say if mailer send. Use the send method, then we return true, otherwise we return false. Oh. And that is our method complete, so we can go ahead and test that out by using the home controller. We'll just use the home controller for now and just refresh the page. So we'll go into our controllers, go into the home controller, and then we'll just call app service mailer, use the send function, and pass in an array of data. So we don't have to use all of the data since we're using the isSet function to check for that data, so we'll just use the from to set the from addresses, which are going to be an array of addresses. So we'll just say email is equal to, and then john.manning89@gmail.com, and the name is of course John Manning, and then we can also add our addresses, or addresses, which is going to be an array of arrays. So our first address is going to be email. We'll send it to ourselves. And we can also pass in the name, which is going to be John Manning. And we can also send that to another address as well, as many as we want to, really. And the email, we'll just use vulgarkittenstudios@gmail.com. And the name is going to be Vulgar Kitten Studios, like that. And now all we need to do is just give it a subject and a body. So we'll say subject, and that is going to be equal to testing the mail. And then the body is actually going to be a view. So we have a method. We set up a wrapper method or a helper method in our mail service to send mails directly from the emails folder. So we'll say app service and view. We'll use the mail function and we'll just send a test email. So we'll open up our views, go into emails, create a new file, call this test.blade.php. And since we're using HTML email, we can use HTML5. And we'll just say sexy mail for the title. For the body, we'll just say h1 and testing the mail, like that. And we can also add a style to it too. So we'll just do our normal style, which is going to be color and AAOO. And now we can use Google Chrome. This will open up fairly quickly. And we'll go to our domain sexy. And this is going to take a sweet time. I want to go to the sexy domain. And the loading will take a little bit longer because it's going to send the email. And hopefully that will come through on our Outlook as soon as this is done loading. Take a sip of my Polar Pop while we wait. And the only reason that it's taking this long is because I actually had to kill the service. I had to kill the Google Chrome service earlier. So it's going to take a sweet time. Looks like there was an error, so hopefully we will see that. Let's see, undefined variable Miller, and that is undefined variable, huh? And the alt body. That's an interesting error. So let's go ahead and go look at that real quick. Miller. It's spelled correctly. So maybe that's just Google Chrome's way of messing up. So let's see how long this takes. So it's actually I have not used the correct variable here because it's a static variable we need to call self. Okay, so that was my mess up. So now we can do this one more time. Hopefully we won't have any errors. And so we don't have any errors. So let's see if the email actually came through. And here we go. So we're testing the mail and we do have our HTML formatting. And that is it. So now we have the ability to send emails through our application. And I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next one.